The quiet power that makes people respect you. Influence without force. Respect is not something you demand. It is not something you negotiate, argue for, or produce through the forceful assertion of your position. You cannot command it into existence through the strength of your conviction about your own worth. You cannot manufacture it through the volume of your claims about your capability. You cannot extract it from the social environment through the persistence of your demand for its recognition. Every attempt to demand respect produces the precise outcome that the demanding was designed to prevent: the social assessment that the person demanding the respect does not have the internal architecture that genuinely respected people have. Because genuinely respected people do not demand it. They simply are what the respect responds to. Respect is something people feel before you even speak. The social intelligence system operates preverbally before any explicit communication has been made, before any claim about capability or character has been offered for assessment. The quality of a person's presence, their internal state, their relationship to the social environment they have entered, all of this is communicated through the behavioral signals that the internal state produces. And all of it is being read by every person in the room before the first word has been said. Some people walk into a room and are ignored. Others walk in and the energy changes. Not because of anything they have said, not because of any formal authority they possess, not because they are louder or more assertive or more visibly demanding of attention. Because they are controlled. The internal governance that keeps the behavior the expression of the deliberate character rather than the reactive output of whatever the social environment is currently producing is the specific quality that the room senses, before any word is spoken, as the quality of the person worth attending to. This audiobook is about that kind of power, not the power of the loud assertion. Not the power of the formal authority, not the power of the resources that give the holder the ability to compel others' behavior. The specific, quiet, genuine power of the person who has built the internal architecture that commands attention and earns the assessment of respect not through any demand for it but through the consistent expression of the qualities that make the respect the accurate and inevitable social response. 10 chapters, each developing a specific dimension of the quiet power that makes people respect you. By the end of this audiobook, your understanding of where respect actually comes from, what builds it, what destroys it, and how to develop the specific qualities that earn it consistently and durably will be specifically and permanently different. Introduction. The architecture of respect. Respect is an assessment, not a feeling, not a sentiment, not the warm regard of the person who likes you. It is the specific cognitive conclusion that emerges from the accumulated observation of a person's behavior across many situations and many conditions, particularly the difficult ones, the pressured ones, the conditions that most test whether the presented character is genuinely present or is the managed surface that the comfortable conditions maintained. The architecture of the person who earns this assessment is specific. It is built from identifiable qualities expressed through identifiable behaviors, accumulated over identifiable time periods, producing the identifiable social assessment that the word respect names. None of this is mysterious. The qualities are developable. The behaviors are practicable. The time period is finite. And the social assessment that follows from the consistent expression of the genuine qualities is as reliable as any assessment that the social intelligence system produces. The 10 chapters that follow develop the specific qualities from the understanding of what respect actually is, through the specific behaviors that build and destroy it, through the specific practices of the calm, the presence, the confidence, the authority, the listening, the social awareness, and the influence to the integrated identity of the person that others respect, not through demand, through becoming. Chapter 1. What respect really is. Respect is not heard, it is perceived. The most important clarification about respect, the clarification that changes the entire approach to building it, is the distinction between the thing that most people are pursuing when they pursue respect and the thing that respect actually is. Most people pursuing respect are pursuing approval, the positive social regard that follows from being liked, being valued by the group, having the social recognition of the contribution. Approval is real and genuinely rewarding, but it is not respect, and the behaviors that most effectively build approval are not the behaviors that most effectively build respect. The difference between respect and approval is the difference between the assessment and the feeling. Approval is primarily an effective response, a positive feeling toward the person who has produced it, generated by the pleasant interaction, the aligned opinion, the social warmth that makes the relationship comfortable. Respect is primarily a cognitive assessment, a conclusion about the person's qualities that emerges from the observation of their behavior under the conditions that reveal character rather than from the enjoyment of their social presence. The specific conditions that reveal character are the difficult ones. Approval builds through the comfortable exchange, the aligned position, the social behavior that produces the pleasant interaction. Respect builds through the observation of the behavior under pressure, under challenge, under the conditions that most test whether the qualities being presented are genuine. The person who is warm and pleasant in comfortable conditions may or may not earn respect. The person who maintains the same quality of behavior, the same standards, the same values, the same composure in the difficult conditions is earning the specific assessment that the word respect names. Emotional versus psychological respect is the second distinction worth developing. Emotional respect is the momentary regard produced by the impressive performance, the powerful statement, the striking demonstration of capability. It can be produced quickly and lost just as quickly the next unimpressive performance, the next ordinary statement, the next failure of the standards that the impressive performance was presenting as consistent. Psychological respect is the accumulated, durable assessment that emerges from the pattern of behavior across many situations over extended time. It builds slowly from the consistent expression of the genuine qualities, and it is not lost by the individual failure or the single unimpressive moment. It is the long-term assessment of the person rather than the momentary reaction to the performance. Why respect cannot be forced is the third element of this foundational chapter, and it is the element most directly relevant to the most common error that people make in the attempt to build respect. The attempt to force respect through the assertion of the claim to it, the demand for the recognition of it, or the performance of the qualities that would produce it in the hope that the performance will be taken for the genuine article fails consistently and specifically. It fails because the social intelligence system that produces the respect assessment is specifically calibrated to the distinction between the genuine and the performed character. The person who is demanding respect is communicating, through the demand itself, The specific information that the demand was trying to suppress, that the respect was not naturally forthcoming, that the social assessment of the person's qualities was not producing the recognition the person requires, and that the demand is the attempt to compel the recognition that the genuine qualities did not produce. The demand is the evidence of the absence of the thing it is demanding. The social intelligence system reads this evidence and updates the assessment accordingly in the opposite direction of what the demand intended. Respect is perceived, not heard. It is the social perception of the genuine qualities, the calm, the stability, the composure, the genuine confidence, the behavioral consistency that builds the assessment. The building of the genuine qualities is the only path to the perception of them. And the genuine qualities, expressed consistently across the conditions that reveal them, produce the respect assessment without any demand for it, because the assessment is simply the accurate registration of what is actually there. Chapter 2. Why people lose respect. Respect is lost faster than it is built. The asymmetry between the rate of the respect building and the rate of the respect loss is one of the most practically important facts about the social assessment that respect represents. The building is slow, accumulated from many instances of the consistent quality expression across extended time. The loss is fast, produced from a single instance of the specific behaviors that reveal the absence of the genuine qualities that the respect was assessing as present. This asymmetry exists because of the specific way the social assessment updates. Respect is built through the accumulated evidence of consistent quality. The update from each new instance of quality is small, one more piece of evidence for the pattern that has many pieces already. But the loss is produced from the discontinuation of the pattern from the single instance that reveals the pattern was not what it appeared to be. A single instance that breaks the established pattern provides significantly more information update than a single instance that is consistent with it. The trust that has been earned over many consistent instances is revised quickly by the single instance that reveals the inconsistency. Cover-explaining is the first and most consistently costly respite-destroying behavior. The cover-explanation is the elaborated justification of a position, a decision, or a choice that the genuinely confident person does not need to produce. The genuine confidence holds the position without the elaboration, because the position is based on the honest self-assessment that does not require the social validation of others' agreement. The cover-explanation is the evidence of the insecurity beneath the presented confidence, the attempt to generate through the force of the elaboration the assent that the presented position alone was not producing. Every additional sentence of the cover-explanation is additional evidence of the activation that the challenge produced. Additional evidence of the self-connect vulnerability that the challenge touched, and additional evidence of the dependence on the social assent that the cover-explanation is attempting to manufacture. The social intelligence system reads all of this evidence and updates the respect assessment accordingly. The person who holds the position briefly and directly, without the elaborating justification, is communicating the genuine confidence that does not require the elaboration. The person who cover-explains is communicating the anxiety of the person who does not hold the position from genuine confidence. Seeking validation is the second major respite-destroying behavior, the specific pattern of the social behavior that is organized around the reception of the confirming feedback rather than around the accurate assessment of the situation and the expression of the genuine position. The validation-seeking behavior is recognizable from its specific quality, the phrasing that invites the agreement before the position has been fully stated. The checking behavior that monitors the response to gauge whether the reception was positive. The adjustment of the position in the direction of the perceived preference of the audience rather than in the direction of the more accurate assessment. The specific social red of the validation-seeking behavior is the red of the dependence. This person needs the confirmation of others to maintain their self-assessment. That need is the specific vulnerability that the respect assessment cannot ignore. The person who needs the validation is the person whose self-concept is primarily determined by the social feedback rather than by the internal evidence, which means the self-concept is available to be shaped by whoever controls the feedback. This availability is the opposite of the internal governance that the respect assessment is evaluating. Emotional reactions are the third major respect-destroying behavior and the one that produces the fastest loss. The single significant emotional reaction, the defensive escalation. The visible distress, the impulsive behavioral output in the social exchange is the single event most capable of producing the rapid respect loss that the asymmetry of this chapter opens with. The reason is specific. The emotional reaction is the direct evidence that the social environment has found the lever in the person's internal architecture that overrides the deliberate governance. The lever has been found and used. The override has occurred. The behavioral quality that the respect assessment had been evaluating as consistently present has been demonstrated as conditionally present, available in the comfortable conditions and not available in the specific condition that the emotional reaction revealed. Respect is lost faster than it is built. The building requires the consistent expression of the genuine qualities across many situations over time. The loss requires the single expression of the behavior that reveals the genuine quality as conditional rather than consistent. The most important implication of this asymmetry is the specific priority it establishes. The maintenance of the behavioral quality in the difficult conditions is more important than the excellent expression of it in the comfortable ones. The comfortable conditions maintain what has been built. The difficult conditions are where it is lost or confirmed as the genuine article. Chapter 3. Calm behavior as a signal of strength. Calm is perceived as control. The specific social perception that calm behavior produces is the perception of control, the specific inference that the social intelligence system draws from the behavioral evidence of the regulated internal state. The inference is this: a person whose behavioral quality does not significantly degrade under the conditions that most consistently produce behavioral degradation in others is a person who is governing their behavior from the inside rather than being driven from the outside. The self-governance is the control. The calm behavior is the evidence of it. The inference is automatic and pre-deliberate. People do not sit down and reason from the calm behavior to the conclusion of control. They perceive the calm and they sense the control without the explicit reasoning. The sensing precedes the analysis and is more reliable than the analysis. Because the social intelligence system that produces the sensing is specifically calibrated to the precise behavioral signals that genuine internal governance produces, the signals that the managed performance of governance cannot perfectly replicate. Non-creative behavior is the specific behavioral expression of the calm that produces the strongest respect signal. The non-creation to the inputs that would reliably produce reactions in most people, the provocation, the challenge, the unexpected difficulty, The social pressure toward the emotional response communicates something very specific about the person's internal architecture. The input arrived, it was registered. It did not produce the behavioral output it was calibrated to produce. The absence of the expected output is the specific evidence that the person's behavior is being governed by something more stable and more internal than the external input. The non-creative quality is not the same as the emotionless quality, and the distinction is important for the accuracy of the respect signal. Emotionless behavior, the flat effect of the person who registers nothing, is not what produces the respect. It produces the social red of the unengaged or the managed exterior, neither of which is the genuine internal governance that the respect assessment is evaluating. The non-creative quality is the full emotional registration of the input alongside the behavioral non-creation to it, feeling the provocation completely, registering the challenge fully, and nonetheless producing the deliberate behavioral response rather than the automatic reactive one. That combination, full internal engagement, governed external expression, is what the calm behavior signal is communicating. Stability under pressure is the amplified version of the non-creative quality, the same behavioral governance expressed in the conditions where the pressure makes it most visible and most differentiating. In comfortable conditions, many people display the calm behavior that comfort naturally permits. The calm under genuine pressure is the specific, rare, and powerfully respite-generating quality that requires the built internal architecture to produce. The person who maintains the measured speech, the composed physical presentation, and the governed behavioral output when the circumstances are genuinely pressing toward the reactive escalation is demonstrating something that the comfortable conditions calm cannot demonstrate, that the governance is genuine rather than contextual. Predictability versus control is a distinction that this chapter must make precisely because they can look similar from the outside and produce very different respect assessments. The predictably reactive person has a consistent behavioral pattern, but the consistency is the consistency of the triggered pattern, not the consistency of the deliberate governance. The social intelligence system distinguishes these two types of consistency. The triggered consistency is the consistency of the person who can be managed through the triggers. The deliberate consistency is the consistency of the person who is governing themselves from the inside and is therefore predictable in the most genuinely reassuring sense, not predictable because you know which triggers will move them, but predictable because you know that their quality of character will be expressed regardless of the conditions. Calm is perceived as control, building the genuine calm, the regulated internal state that produces the non-creative behavior. The stability under pressure and the deliberately consistent quality expression is building the specific quality that the respect assessment is specifically calibrated to detect. The calm does not need to announce itself. It is perceived, and the perception produces the assessment without any demand for the recognition of it. Chapter 4. Emotional stability and presence. People feel your internal state before they hear your words. The preverbal communication of the internal state was introduced in the psychological presence chapter of the Quiet Power audiobook and is developed here specifically in the context of the respite-generating qualities it produces. The internal state produces the behavioral signals, the vocal quality, the movement pace, the physical composure, the attentional direction that the social intelligence system reads before any verbal content has been offered. These preverbal signals communicate the quality of the internal state more directly and more reliably than the verbal content. Because the verbal content can be deliberately managed, while the preverbal behavioral signals require the regulated internal state to produce them naturally. The presence that the emotionally stable person produces in the social environment is the presence that is sensed before it is analyzed. The genuinely regulated, genuinely present person communicates the specific quality of being fully there, the full attentional engagement with what is actually happening, the genuine interest in the exchange, the unhurried quality of the person whose internal state is not primarily occupied with the management of the anxiety that social performance produces in the person who is not genuinely present. Energy in the social environment is the informal word for the emotional contagion mechanism that the social brain produces through the limbic resonance processes. The emotional state of each person in the social environment is being continuously transmitted through the preverbal behavioral signals and continuously received by the other participants through the automatic mirroring process. The energy of the emotionally stable person, the specific, consistent, regulated quality of the preverbal signals, is the stabilizing contribution to the shared emotional environment. It presses the temperature toward the regulated baseline that allows the full cognitive and relational quality of the interaction to be available. The social red of this stabilizing contribution is not always explicit. People in the presence of the genuinely stable person often experience the interaction as going well, as being productive, as being clearer than usual, without identifying the specific quality of the stable person's contribution as the cause. The cause is real. The stabilizing energy of the regulated presence is the specific input that has made the interaction's quality possible. The respect that the stable person earns is partly the accumulated assessment of many interactions that went better in their presence than in their absence. Emotional consistency is the temporal dimension of the emotional stability, the quality of the internal state maintained not only in the comfortable moments, but across the full range of conditions that the relationship and the social environment produce. The emotionally consistent person is the same person in the meeting that runs badly as in the one that runs well. The same person in the difficult conversation as in the easy one. The same person when the news is good as when it is not. This consistency is the specific quality of the person whose internal state is primarily determined by their own values and their own assessment rather than by the social feedback loop. The consistency builds the specific trust that the respect assessment evaluates most highly. Internal balance is the practice that produces the emotional consistency, the ongoing, daily governance of the internal state through the specific regulatory practices that this series has developed across multiple audiobooks. The breath regulation that addresses the physiological basis of the activation before it degrades the behavioral quality. The awareness practice that monitors the internal state and makes the deviations from the balanced baseline visible before they affect the behavioral output. The thought control that prevents the elaboration chains from amplifying the genuine emotional responses beyond the genuine features of the situation they are responding to. People feel your internal state before they hear your words. The internal state is therefore the primary quality that the respect-building effort must focus on, not the words, not the explicit claims, not the verbal presentation of the character, but the genuine internal state that the preverbal behavioral signals will communicate before any word is spoken. The building of the genuine emotional stability is the building of the specific quality that the social environment is sensing before the conversation has begun. Get the internal state right, and the pre-verbal communication takes care of itself. Manage the internal state through performance, and the performance's inadequacy communicates before the first word is spoken. Chapter 5. Confidence without ego. True confidence has nothing to prove. The confidence that most people recognize as confidence is not the confidence that most effectively generates respect. The performed confidence, the assertive presence, the loud declaration of the self-conscious capability, the forceful occupation of the social space is the confidence that is organized around the social recognition of itself. It requires the room's acknowledgement of the claim. It requires the opposition to yield to the force of the assertion. It requires the constant performance of the quality it is claiming to have. Because the quality is not internally sufficient to maintain the confidence without the external confirmation. Genuine confidence, the specific internal architecture of the honest, well-evidenced, non-defensive self-assessment has no such requirement. The genuine confidence holds whether or not the room is providing the recognition. It holds whether or not the challenge is yielding to the assertion. It holds because it is based on the actual evidence of the demonstrated capability, the actual record of the functioning well under the conditions that mattered, and the actual consistent behavioral quality that the honest self-assessment can point to. The genuinely confident person does not need the social performance to maintain the confidence. The confidence is maintained by its own evidence base. Quiet confidence is the specific behavioral expression of this genuine internal architecture. The quiet is the absence of the performance, the absence of the assertive claim, the loud declaration, the forceful occupation of the social space. The quiet is not the absence of the confidence. It is the specific expression of the confidence that has nothing to prove. The genuinely confident person holds their position without the performance of holding it. They speak clearly without the force of the assertion. They engage with the challenge without the defensiveness of the person whose self-unept depends on the challenge not landing. The social red of the quiet confidence is the specific red of the internal sufficiency, the specific perception that this person does not need the room's recognition to maintain the quality of their self-assessment. The person who does not need the recognition is not governed by the recognition. The person who is not governed by the recognition is the person whose behavior cannot be reliably shaped by its withholding. The social intelligence system registers this as the specific quality of the genuine authority rather than the performed one. No need for validation is the specific behavioral practice of the quiet confidence, the consistent pattern of holding the position without the social confirmation, making the statement without the monitoring of the reception, and allowing the silence after the contribution without the anxious checking for the confirmation that the contribution was received appropriately. Each instance of the quiet confidence practice is a training session for the internal architecture, a specific exercise in maintaining the position from the internal evidence rather than from the external feedback. The training accumulates, the architecture builds, and the quiet confidence that was initially the deliberate practice becomes the natural expression of the developed self-assessment. Self-assurance is the experienced quality of the quiet confidence, the specific internal state of the person who is settled in their own assessment without the ongoing anxiety of the person who is monitoring the social environment for the confirmation that the assessment is accurate. The self-assured person is not arrogant. Arrogance is the inflated self-assessment that requires the social management of the evidence that would deflate it. The self-assured person is not complacent. Complacency is the absence of the honest engagement with the genuine limits of the current development. The self-assurance is the settled, honest, well-evidenced relationship with the actual self, the actual capabilities, the actual record, the actual qualities that does not require the social environment's confirmation because the confirmation is already present in the internal evidence. True confidence has nothing to prove. Building the genuine confidence is the building of the genuine evidence base, the actual demonstrated capability, the actual consistent behavioral quality, the actual record of functioning well under the conditions that genuinely tested the functioning. The evidence base is built through genuine engagement with genuine challenges. The confidence that follows from the genuine evidence base is the confidence that holds under the social challenge, because the social challenge cannot undermine an assessment that is based on honest evidence rather than on the performance of a quality that is not genuinely present. Chapter 6. Speaking with authority. Words carry weight when there are fewer of them. The relationship between the quantity of words and their weight is one of the most specific and most consistently underappreciated mechanisms of verbal influence and authority. The relationship is inverse. As the quantity of words increases, the weight of each individual word decreases. The person who speaks frequently occupies a larger share of the verbal space of the exchange and a smaller share of the other's genuine attention per unit of speech. The person who speaks infrequently occupies a smaller share of the verbal space and a larger share of the genuine attention when they do occupy it. Clear communication is the first quality of the authoritative speech. Clarity in speech is the specific quality of the communication that says what it means, precisely and completely, without the elaboration that the anxious speaker adds to protect against misunderstanding, and without the qualification that the uncertain speaker adds to protect against the commitment that might be wrong. The clear statement commits. It says the thing. Without the hedge, without the qualification, without the extended justification. The commitment is the clarity's courage, the willingness to be wrong, to be challenged, to be disagreed with, and to hold the position from the honest assessment rather than protecting against challenge through the endless qualification. The specific practices of clear communication in the authority-building context are the practices of the prior assessment and the precise expression. The prior assessment before the contribution is made. The specific determination of what is to be communicated and what the most direct and sufficient expression of it is. This prior assessment is the specific practice that keeps the communication from being the real-time construction of the thought, the thinking out loud quality that the genuinely confident person does less of and the anxious person does more of. The prior assessment means the communication is the expression of the completed thought rather than the process of completing it. Slower speech is the second quality of the authoritative communication. The speed of the speech is one of the most directly legible behavioral signals of the internal activation state. The fast speech, the words emerging at the pace of the urgency that is pressing them out, is the speech of the activated internal state. and the social intelligence system reads the speed as the activation signal rather than as the content signal. The slower speech, the deliberate, measured pace of the person whose internal state is not urgency-driven, is read as the signal of the regulated internal state and, by extension, as the signal of the authority that the regulation represents. The specific practice of the slower speech is the deliberate reduction of the rate below the urgency-driven default, the pace that the regulated internal state naturally produces rather than the pace that the anxiety of the social performance presses toward. The slower speech has a specific additional quality. It creates the sense of the considered statement rather than the urgency-driven one. The person whose speech rate communicates unhurried deliberation is communicating that the words were assessed before they were spoken. That assessment communicates the authority of the person who thinks before speaking rather than speaking to think. Intentional words are the synthesis of the prior assessment, the precise expression, and the slower speech, the specific quality of the contribution that was chosen rather than generated. That says what it means without excess, and that was delivered at the pace that communicates the deliberation that produced it. The intentional word is the word that carries the weight of the intention behind it. The social intelligence system receives the intentionality as information about the person producing the words. This person's verbal output is governed by the deliberate assessment rather than driven by the activated internal state. The governance is the authority. The intentional words are the evidence of it. Words carry weight when there are fewer of them. Building the speaking which authority capacity requires the consistent practice of the prior assessment and the precise expression in the ordinary verbal exchanges of daily life, the deliberate brief pause before the reply, the specific determination of the point before the statement of it, the discipline of ending the contribution when the point has been made rather than continuing until the anxiety of the pause drives the continuation. These are the ordinary practice sessions for the quality of the verbal contribution that the genuinely authoritative person produces as the natural expression of the developed deliberate mind. Chapter 7. The Power of Listening. The person who listens controls the conversation. The control that listening produces in the conversational context is not the obvious control of the assertive verbal domination that most people associate with conversational influence. It is the specific, deeper control of the person who is gathering the complete picture while the other parties are managing their own verbal output, the informational and positional control of the observer who sees more than the producers. The specific mechanism of the listening as control dynamic is the informational asymmetry that genuine listening creates. The person who is genuinely listening, whose attentional resource is fully directed at the incoming communication rather than divided between reception and response preparation, is gathering the verbal content, the emotional quality, the internal state signals, the genuine concerns beneath the stated positions, and the pattern of the exchange over time. The person who is preparing the response while the other person is still speaking is gathering only the verbal content, and imperfectly at that the response preparation mode captures the gist of the statement rather than the full content, enough to respond plausibly but not enough to respond to what was actually fully said. Active listening is the specific attentional practice that produces the genuine listening rather than the response preparation mode that most people call listening. The active listening requires the specific suppression of the response preparation function, the deliberate cessation of the generation of the response before the other person has finished speaking. This suppression is not natural. The social intelligence system is continuously generating candidate responses in parallel with the reception of the incoming communication. The suppression of the candidate response generation is the specific discipline that reserves the full attentional resource for the reception of what is actually being said rather than for the preparation of the response to the gist of it. The additional practice element of active listening is the specific attention to the nonverbal communication that accompanies the verbal content, the emotional quality of the delivery, the physical signals of the internal state, the inconsistencies between the verbal and nonverbal that reveal the full communication rather than only the explicit one. These additional channels of communication are specifically available to the genuine listener and specifically unavailable to the response preparer, who is dedicating the attentional resource to the response generation rather than to the full reception. Reading people through the genuine listening is the specific informational product of the active listening practice, the fuller, more accurate model of the other person's actual concerns, actual motivations, and actual position that the complete reception of their communication produces. This model is qualitatively more accurate than the model that the response preparation mode produces, because it is based on the full communication rather than the gist. The more accurate model produces the more accurately calibrated response, the response that is specifically targeted at what was actually communicated rather than at the assumed gist. Letting others speak is the specific behavioral expression of the power of listening in the social influence context, the deliberate non-filling of the silence, the non-interruption of the other person's communication before it is complete, and the non-jumping in that allows the other person's full communication to be made rather than only the portion that the impatient listener's interruption permitted. The person who lets others speak fully is gathering the full communication. The person who is listening only until the response preparation is complete enough to justify the interruption is gathering the beginning. The social effect of letting others speak is the specific effect of being the person who provides the full attentional reception that most social exchanges are not providing. Most people in most exchanges are experiencing the social interaction of being received partially, of having their communication interrupted before it is complete, of having their statements responded to at the just level rather than the full level, of being in the presence of the person whose attentional resource is clearly directed partly elsewhere. The person who provides the genuine full reception is providing a qualitatively different social experience that is specifically registered, often without explicit analysis, as the experience of being genuinely attended to. The person who listens controls the conversation. The control is the informational control of the person who has gathered the fuller picture, and the positional control of the person who has provided the social experience of the genuine reception. Both forms of control are specific and consistent, and both are available only to the person whose attentional resource is genuinely directed at what the other person is saying rather than at the preparation of what they themselves will say next. Chapter 8. Social Awareness. You cannot influence what you do not understand. Social awareness is the specific cognitive capacity of reading the social environment accurately, the dynamics, the motivations, the positions, and the behavioral patterns of the people in it with sufficient precision to engage with what is actually there rather than with the simplified version that the inattentive observation produces. The socially aware person is navigating the actual social environment. The socially inattentive person is navigating the model of it that their limited observation has produced, which is typically a significantly less accurate model than the actual environment warrants. The respite-generating quality of social awareness is the specific quality of the person whose engagement with others is consistently more accurately calibrated than the engagement of the socially inattentive person. The precise response to what was actually communicated rather than to the just. The accurate read of the dynamic rather than the assumption of the most convenient interpretation of it. The correct identification of the genuine concern beneath the stated position rather than the response to the stated position that misses the genuine concern. Each of these is a specific expression of the social awareness that produces the specific respect assessment of the person who actually sees what is happening. Reading dynamics is the specific social awareness practice of attending to the pattern-level information that the group social environment produces, the information about who is aligned with whom, whose position carries the most informal weight, what the undercurrents of the exchange are beneath the surface content, and what the actual trajectory of the situation is rather than the nominal one. This pattern-level information is available only to the person who is attending to the full social environment rather than only to the explicit verbal content of the exchange. The observer position described in multiple earlier chapters of this series is the foundational attentional practice for the dynamis reading capacity, the partial withdrawal from the fully immersed participant role to the role that can see the broader pattern of the social exchange. The observer sees what the producer misses, the full signal set, the relational dynamics, the pattern over time. Each of these is the raw material of the social awareness that produces the more accurately calibrated engagement. Understanding behavior is the second dimension of the social awareness practice, the accurate read of the motivations, concerns, and behavioral patterns of specific individuals rather than only of the group dynamics. The accurate model of the specific other person is built from the genuine listening of Chapter 7, the full reception of their communication, the reading of their nonverbal signals, the preverbal information about their internal state, and the pattern of their behavior over time, the historical evidence of their consistent motivations and responses. The accurate individual model is the specific prerequisite for the more precisely calibrated engagement with the specific person, the engagement that serves the genuine relationship rather than the engagement with the imagined version of the person that the inattentive observation has constructed. People sense the accuracy of the engagement when someone is responding to what you actually said rather than to what they assumed you meant. When someone has correctly identified your genuine concern rather than responding to the surface position that was concealing it. The quality of that engagement is specifically felt as the quality of the person who actually sees you. Predicting reactions is the third dimension of the social awareness practice, the specific capacity to anticipate the behavioral responses of the people in the social environment to the specific inputs, changes, and demands that the situation is producing. This predictive capacity is the direct product of the accurate individual and group models. The more accurate the model, the more reliably it predicts the behavior. The predictive capacity is practically valuable not because it allows the manipulation of others' behavior, but because it allows the anticipatory calibration of the engagement, the adjustment of the communication, and the approach to the actual person and the actual dynamic rather than to the model that insufficient observation would have produced. You cannot influence what you do not understand. Social awareness is the specific prerequisite for the social influence that the next chapter develops, the influence that operates through the accurate engagement with what is actually there rather than through the force of the demand or the persistence of the pressure. The understanding builds the influence. The influence cannot be built without it. Chapter 9. Influence without force. Influence is not pressure, it is direction. The distinction between pressure-based influence and direction-based influence is the distinction between the influence that compels and the influence that guides. Pressure-based influence works by applying the social, positional, or emotional force that makes non-compliance more costly than compliance. It produces the desired behavior, but at the cost of the relationship quality, the intrinsic motivation, and the respect for the person applying the pressure. Direction-based influence works by creating the conditions in which the desired behavior is the natural expression of the other person's own assessment, motivation, and genuine engagement with the situation. It produces the desired behavior without the cost and often strengthens the relationship quality and the respect in the process. The specific quality that makes direction-based influence possible is the social awareness developed in Chapter 8. You cannot guide a person toward an outcome that serves both their genuine interests and the requirements of the situation if you do not have an accurate model of their genuine interests. The direction-based influence is not the manipulation that conceals the influence's purpose from the person being influenced. It is the genuine alignment of the person's genuine interests with the direction that the situation requires, an alignment that is possible only if the social awareness is sufficient to identify the genuine interests accurately. Subtle leadership is the social expression of the direction-based influence, the specific quality of the person who is shaping the direction of the situation and the exchange without the explicit assertion of the leadership role. A subtle leader does not announce the direction. They create the conditions in which the direction becomes apparent and the others in the exchange naturally orient toward it. This is the functional leadership described in several earlier audiobooks of this series, the leadership that emerges from the quality of the contribution rather than from the formal designation. Guiding conversations is the specific social practice of the direction-based influence in the verbal exchange context. The conversational guide is not the conversational dominator, the person whose volume and persistence and assertiveness direct the conversation through force. The conversational guide is the person who asks the specific question at the specific moment that opens the dimension of the conversation that the conversation needed to include, who provides the reframe that shifts the conversation from the unproductive to the productive, who allows the silence that creates the space for the more genuine contribution to emerge. Each of these is an active conversational direction that does not require the force of the assertion. It requires the social awareness that identified the opportunity and the timing that delivered the contribution precisely. Calm authority is the quality from which the direction-based influence is produced. The calm authority is the authority described throughout this series, the functional authority of the person whose assessments are most trusted, whose contributions most consistently serve the genuine requirements of the situation, and whose regulated presence most consistently improves the quality of the social environment. The calm authority does not need to assert the influence. The influence is the natural expression of the trusted, accurate, regulated engagement with the social environment. The people in the environment orient toward the influence because the influence is oriented toward what serves them and the situation genuinely. The long-term quality of the direction-based influence is its most specific advantage over the pressure-based alternative. The pressure-based influence produces the compliance but generates the resistance that accumulates over repeated applications, the relationship erosion, the intrinsic motivation reduction, the respect loss that the power imbalance creates. The direction-based influence produces the compliance without the resistance, or more accurately, it produces the genuine motivation rather than the compliance, because the person is moving toward the outcome because their own genuine assessment has led them there, not because the pressure made the alternative too costly. Influence is not pressure, it is direction. Building the direction-based influence capacity requires the specific development of the social awareness that makes the accurate alignment possible, the genuine calm and presence that make the contribution trustworthy rather than suspect, and the patience to allow the direction to be taken through the other person's own assessment rather than through the force of the pressure. The patience is the discipline. The direction is the influence, and the influence that emerges from the genuine alignment of the person's genuine interests with the requirements of the situation is the most powerful and most sustainable social influence available. Chapter 10. Becoming a person others respect. Respect is the result of behavior repeated many times. The identity of the person that others respect is the accumulated product of the specific behaviors, expressed consistently across many situations over extended time, that the preceding 9 chapters have been developing, not the single impressive instance, not the occasional expression of the qualities in the comfortable conditions. The consistent, repeated, condition-independent expression of the calm, the stability, the genuine confidence, the authoritative communication, the genuine listening, the social awareness, and the direction-based influence, each instance contributing its small increment to the accumulated evidence from which the identity is built. The identity formation process is the same process described in multiple earlier audiobooks of this series. The behavior produces the evidence. The evidence builds the self-inept. The self-inept sustains the behavior that produces the evidence. The virtuous cycle of identity-based respite earning is the cycle in which the consistent expression of the genuine qualities produces the identity of the person who expresses these qualities consistently, not as the effortful performance of an aspiration, but as the natural expression of a developed character. Consistency is the first dimension of the identity that others respect, the specific behavioral quality that makes the assessment the durable trust rather than the momentary approval. The consistent person is the person who is the same person in the difficult conditions as in the comfortable ones, who holds the same standards when the maintaining of them costs something as when it costs nothing, who expresses the same quality of character in the private situation as in the observed one. This consistency is the specific quality that the respect assessment is most specifically evaluating and that the approval assessment does not require. Building the consistency requires the specific management of the conditions that most consistently undermine it, the overload state that depletes the regulatory resource, the specific triggers that compromise the deliberate governance, and the social pressure situations that press toward the compliant adjustment of the expressed character in the direction of the perceived audience preference. Each of these is the specific challenge to the consistency. The management of each is the specific practice of the consistency that the respect-building identity requires. Discipline is the second dimension, the ongoing, daily, unremarkable practice of the specific behaviors that build the respect-earning identity. The discipline of the awareness practice that monitors the internal state. The discipline of the regulation practice that maintains the governed external expression. The discipline of the listening practice that provides the full attentional reception. The discipline of the prior assessment that keeps the verbal contribution intentional. The discipline of the non-creative behavior that communicates the internal governance. Each of these is a daily practice. The daily practice is the development. The development is the identity. The discipline is not the dramatic exercise of the heroic self-governance in the face of the overwhelming emotional challenge. It is the consistent, unremarkable, daily application of the specific practices in the ordinary situations of ordinary life, the minor frustration that is regulated, the small social pressure that is held against, the ordinary exchange that is genuinely listened to, the everyday contribution that is deliberately assessed before it is made. These are the sessions. The sessions accumulate into the identity. The identity is the person that others respect. Identity is the third and final dimension, the specific self-concept of the person who expresses these qualities consistently. Built from the accumulated evidence of many instances of the consistent quality expression and sustained by the self-consistency motivation that makes the quality consistent behavior natural. The identity of the respected person is not arrived at through the single transformation. It is the gradual, accumulated, evidence-based development of the self-concept of the person who does these things, who maintains the calm, holds the standard, listens genuinely, speaks deliberately, and governs the behavioral output from the inside rather than from the outside. Respect is the result of behavior repeated many times. The behavior is specific. The repetition is the discipline. The accumulated result is the identity. And the identity, expressed consistently in the conditions that reveal it as genuine rather than performed, produces the specific social assessment that the word respect names. Closing. The quiet that earns. You do not need to demand respect. You do not need to prove anything. The proving is the performance. The performance communicates the absence of the genuine quality it is performing, because the genuine quality does not require the performance. The person who is genuinely calm does not need to assert that they are calm. The person who is genuinely confident does not need to demonstrate the confidence through the force of the assertion. The person who is genuinely present does not need to announce the presence. These qualities communicate themselves through the preverbal behavioral signals that the social intelligence system is continuously reading, before any word is spoken, before any claim is made. Chapter 1 established the nature of the target, the psychological assessment rather than the affective approval. The cognitive conclusion that emerges from the observation of the genuine qualities under the conditions that reveal them. The difference between respect and approval. The distinction between emotional respect and psychological respect. And the specific mechanism through which the demand for respect communicates the absence of the qualities that would produce it without the demand. Chapter 2 mapped the losses over-explaining as the evidence of the insecurity beneath the presented confidence. Seeking validation as the evidence of the dependence on social feedback for the maintenance of the self-assessment. Emotional reactions as the direct evidence of the lost governance that the respect assessment most specifically values. Respect is lost faster than it is built. The asymmetry that establishes the specific priority of maintaining the behavioral quality in the difficult conditions above the excellent expression of it in the comfortable ones. Chapter 3 Develop the calm as a signal, the non-greedive behavior communicating the internal governance. The stability under pressure communicating the genuine rather than contextual quality, and the precise distinction between the predictable pattern of the triggered person and the deliberate consistency of the genuinely governed one. Chapter 4 Built the emotional stability and presence, the preverbal communication of the internal state. The energy of the regulated person as the stabilizing contribution to the social environment, and the emotional consistency as the temporal dimension of the stability that builds the specific trust the respect assessment evaluates. Chapter 5 Develop the confidence without ego, the quiet confidence that has nothing to prove. The self-assurance that is built from the genuine evidence base rather than from the social performance, and the specific building path, genuine engagement with genuine challenges producing the evidence from which the genuine confidence grows. Chapter 6 Built the speaking with authority, the inverse relationship between word quantity and word weight. The clear communication that commits without the elaborate justification, the slower speech as the behavioral signal of the regulated internal state, and the intentional words that communicate the deliberate assessment rather than the urgency of the activation. Chapter 7 Develop the power of listening, the informational control that genuine listening produces. The active listening practice that reserves the full attentional resource for reception rather than response preparation, and the specific social experience of the genuine reception that the person who listens fully provides. Chapter 8 Built the social awareness, reading dynamics, understanding behavior, predicting reactions, the specific cognitive capacity that makes the more accurately calibrated engagement possible and the direction-based influence available. Chapter 9 Developed influence without force, the alignment of genuine interests with genuine requirements that the direction-based influence produces. The subtle leadership of the conversation guide, and the calm authority from which the trusted influence naturally flows without the assertion that pressure-based influence requires. And Chapter 10 named the destination, the consistent, disciplined, identity-level expression of the genuine qualities that respect responds to behavior repeated many times, producing the evidence, building the identity, and earning the assessment that the demand could never produce. Just become someone who is calm, stable, and in control. And respect will follow naturally. Not because you demanded it. Because you became what it responds to. That becoming is the project. 10 chapters, 1 direction. The rest is the practice. Consistently. Quietly. Without demanding anything. Respected.